Thanks everyone for joining so far. We'll just wait a couple more minutes for the latecomers to join us. What coffee are you drinking at the moment, Terry?
Let me check. Aldi coffee?
You'll be doing better than that.
Aldi is the only thing that opens, mate. apparently it's yuck.
Aldi coffee, I know. You can do
Yeah,
better
I
than
know.
that. I think you can.
I know what Brian drinks. He's got this secret boutique coffee he got from somewhere. He roasts his own. Yeah, why don't you deliver to my house? I will send you my address.
Last week I was on that webinar and we were talking about, I've been watching this guy who does this amazing coffee guy doing this amazing YouTube videos, and it just makes me, man, I just drink trying to follow all these cupping recipes and tasting recipes and all this sort of stuff. It's just, yeah, I can see I'm going to spend lots of money on coffee stuff. What's his name? Let me find the name while I'm doing this before we start, because this is the important stuff, really, isn't it, everyone?
I know, and like our chat and the QA just lights up with coffee
Yeah,
questions.
lights up coffee, because we're on the same. We're on the same thing.
Been back at a coffee.
James Hoffman. So check him out on YouTube. James
actually,
Hoffman.
Only if I have a serverless coffee supplier.
Serverless coffee supplier. We should probably get started, shouldn't we? Too much coffee again.
Yep.
So, all right. Thanks everyone for joining us for our fourth webinar so far. And today we're going to get a bit technical today. This is a little bit more technical than our previous three. So for those of you who are on this journey, thank you so much. So I would recommend grabbing a coffee or a very strong tea or something stronger. I won't recommend because we're going to get into the weeds here today. So before we kick off, just allow me to introduce Terry. Terry is our head of technology at Leonardo. Thanks for joining us, Terry.
Thank you, Daniel.
We've got a few more webinars in our schedule coming up. Next week, we've got a webinar on compliance and how a process-centric approach can help with that. Followed the next week, we've got a webinar on, or follow-up webinar to our process mining session we did a few weeks ago. So if you want to see a hands-on demonstration of intelligent process mining analytics, Ian and Marcello will be demonstrating that on June the 10th. And we've got a few more ones in the bag, which we'll announce very shortly. So again, for those of you who have joined us, thanks very much for joining us today. Q&A, you can chat in the chat, which is great. If you've got any formal questions you want us to address at the end of this, please chuck it in the Q&A and Terry and I will get to it at the end. We've got a lot to cover, so I don't want to talk for too much longer. If you're on YouTube, we've got a few YouTube people watching us out there. We're not monitoring any comments, so the nasty things you say or the good things you say, we won't see them until the end. So, okay. All right, so we're here to talk about serverless. So for those people who attended the earlier webinar on intelligent process automation, that was 3 weeks ago, Terry spoke about how a bench seat and Hello Kitty had improved his daughter's homeschooling experience. And if you want to find out more, you can just go to the landing page, the Wednesday webinar landing page, and you can go and download that on demand. So Terry, 3 weeks later, tell me, how's homeschool going?
Yeah, it's going okay. And I think a lot of our attendees probably agree with me that homeschooling is absolutely not easy. If one thing I do notice though through this journey is that Google Class and all these various online resources that the school sent to me, they're not actually the easiest thing to set up and to work with. So I actually found in myself somehow become the person in the house, on demand, always ready IT support person. My family bursts into my office, like right here, all the time, demanding me to fix something from the school. And I'm reasonably IT literate, but I can't imagine how every family can deal with this sudden need. You know what, Daniel? In some way, to my family, I'm actually providing a serverless IT support. on demand, always ready, and cost nothing. Or is it?
I don't know, Terry. Like, look, firstly, I just ask you how your homeschool was going. So, okay, answer your question. Are you really on demand? Yes, unless you're presenting a webinar, of course. And as I said, please make sure the door's locked because we don't want your daughter barging in. You know, that's just embarrassing. And no IT help desking for the next 30 minutes. But yes, you're always on demand. So always ready, except maybe when you're a bit hungry and therefore you lose your focus. And you sell yourself short, I reckon. So you certainly don't cost anything. So even though you offer your time for free, so you've gone through years of education to become that person who can spot fix that IT issue that your family's got. So we talked about scaling. We had this conversation when we were talking about the intelligent process or improvement. We're talking about scaling customer experience and how you couldn't do that without technology.
Yep.
So I know that we haven't invented like the sort of cloning that's going to help you. So you're providing IT support. It's not quite serverless, is it?
No, you're right, Daniel. I'm actually performing this IT support with a lot of hallmark of a serverless service, right? Obviously, without the automation and scalability. You know, serverless is somewhat a very confusing term. So let me give you what I think a less controversial definition. And then maybe I'll give you another example. Maybe using my favorite TV show from my childhood, The Knight Riders.
This is going to be a fantastic presentation if Knight Riders involved. All right, tell me how this all links up.
All right. So in order for me to explain what serverless concept is, I'll probably explain what a service is. So if you look at this gray box on the screen, a service consists of an actions responding to an event or request, and a result comes back, right? So then we look at the characteristic of a service on the top. It's triggered by events and responded quickly, ephemeral, always hard to say, status essentially, and scale the resource back to zero. So none of these characteristics are unique to serverless, but collectively they define what serverless is. So Daniel, I know it's probably a bit dry for you.
That's a bit dry.
Yeah, let me get to the Knight Rider example.
Yeah, right, I want to hear how you relate this to Knight Rider.
All right, so imagine Michael got himself a bit of problem, right? So he go, "Hey kid, come and pick me up," right? And the kid responded and said, "Yeah, here I come," over his super watch, and now the car actually come, open the door and save Michael from a dangerous situation. So let me put this into a serverless context for you here. So the first thing is that Michael has done this request through a common language. So a language that is understood by kids, in this case, just the English, or in my childhood, Mandarin. And then what happened is kid understood the context and the situation where Michael is in, start the engine, navigate, and open the door for Michael. And now the request is being fulfilled. So, Daniel, a service consists of event, actions, and results. A server is a minimum computing power to support a service. In this case, come and pick me up, right, is a service, and kick is the server.
Yeah. Okay, I understand that. But so you're saying that this is not serverless architecture. I mean, clearly in this example, someone or something is waiting for a command. And so in this case, it's Kit's powerful processing unit or whatever. And something needs to perform the task. In this case, that is Kit. But that's not quote unquote serverless. Am I right there?
Yeah, I mean that's right. So I mean, serverless probably is a misnomer, meaning that it's not without server, right? It's also an active debate on what the definition of a serverless is. Look, let me just get to the next introduction about what this is. So if we look at from Michael's perspective, when he said, "Come and pick me up," the action from his perspective is like a service, right? In fact, it's actually very similar to what we call a function as a service. However, from Kit's perspective, the car is at the rest and only become active when a request is made by Michael. So Kit has this ability to stop start the engine, and it's very similar to a serverless architecture. So Daniel, in some ways, serverless is a concept that depends on who is asking. In effect, what the technologists call a separation of concern.
Okay. So if serverless is a concept that depends on your viewpoint, how does serverless relate to all the other industry trends like microservices and service-oriented architecture and container platforms?
Yeah, not a very easy concept to explain, even to the IT professional.
Or to a marketing guy?
Well, I'll try.
Okay.
So let me use Michael as an example, right? When he said, I need to go somewhere, and let's use the transportation infrastructure example. So firstly, we had this concept of railway. So railway line has a fixed number of stations, and it can only go from one station to next station. So if you want to add an extension to that line to a new location, say Byron Bay, and there's a ton of work that need to be done. And sometimes it might not even be possible. So you can think of the railway as a monolithic applications.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of work to be done if you want to get the railway to Byron. So okay. So under this analogy, Michael probably has to walk or get to the station, and from the station on his journey. So there's something that happens before and after the fixed rail transport. But doesn't he have to contend also with the scheduling train timetable? There's only a train that goes at a certain time of day, and that puts I suppose a constraint on the resources in this example.
Yeah, you're right. And that's why a good railway station is always complemented by, say, a bus network, right? So adding a new station to the bus network is much easier, and we can remove much of a constraint, similar to what railway has, and reuse a lot of this a bus network using this hub and spot. In fact, if a combination of both of the technology, then it's actually very similar to a enterprise service bus architecture.
Okay, so yeah, I can see there's we're increasing flexibility here in planning the journey. I can take a bus to the station, I can hop on the train, travel on the train, hop off the train, and take another bus from the train station to where I want to go. Okay, so there's way more flexibility here than there is in the train. But with a bus, I still need to plan ahead. I've still got those schedules and bus timetables to work through so I can get to where I want to on time. I'm still constrained by the bus timetable next to the train timetable.
Yeah, you're right. And I think what you need is a taxi service, right? Actually, so you can hail or request a taxi to pick you up anywhere, anytime. And there's actually a standard contract between you and the taxi. So that is, the cost per kilometer in exchange to get you to a destination, ideally. And this is what somewhat actually similar to a SOA architecture. That there is a contract upfront, and we know the result of that.
Yeah, okay. I like the convenience of taxis, but not all taxis have the same sort of quality of service and comfort that I'm used to. Maybe they're old, and some of them are covered in plastic, and some of them there's like TVs that sit in the back of the seat that just yell at you the whole time. So, and they also have those sort of interesting smells.
Yeah, funny you mentioned that, because really in a lot of SOA architecture I think not all servers are built the same, and some really stink, to be honest. So if you want a bespoke, a quality service, you can use a limousine service with a chauffeur, right? Similar to a microservice architecture, actually.
Yeah, and I do like, I like the finer things in life, and have used a service of a limo once or twice. I occasionally use like the chauffeur. They meet me at the airport and they're great. They had a little sign, and if the plane's late, they'll wait for me, and they have comfortable cars. I know what I'm going to get. However, in my experience, the drivers will often change over. So I get different drivers, I get different cars. Sometimes I have to make sure I get the number of the driver for next time because they've changed over, they've moved to a different fleet. So I suppose, and I often think to myself, sometimes I don't really need a chauffeur or the fancy car. I just want I just want a taxi-like service with good quality car, with no smell, someone that can meet me where I'm at, where I'm at. If only there was a service like this, Terry.
Yeah, I think you're spot on here. Similar to microservice architecture, there's actually a lot of upkeep and management in the microservice architecture because things are smaller and it's always been an issue. I think what you're talking about is Uber-like service. If I extend this analogy a bit further, Uber is like providing a function as a service for your transportation needs. So Uber platform provides a standard contract, very much like what you have with taxi. And each driver is independently run, so they look after their car, and it's operate, pretty much like a chauffeur, like a microservice. However, the Uber platform also provides a level of convenience for you to use the service, essentially removing you from low-level administrations and let you focus on actually getting somewhere from where you are going, right? So that's what Uber and a function as a service provide.
Yeah, and I use Uber a lot, as you know. Very convenient. As you said, the cars are better. I like it because I can, at a moment's notice, I can decide that it's time to go to the airport. So I'm in our Melbourne office, and I can finish up a meeting with you, pick up my bags, go straight to the street. I can request a service. We've all done it. There's a car around the corner waiting for me, and I'm in the car and I'm gone. But I suppose that applies in that scenario. But where we live in Byron here, there's no Ubers around to wait to pick me up. Ideally, I'd love to be able to have that same service in my sort of country little life, but there's not going to be a car that's going to be waiting for me just around the corner. So I suppose what I need is I want a car that's on demand, like 24 hours a day that I can use, but to take me to the airport, to take me to town, and I want to have the confidence and assurance that the car is just there waiting for me.
Daniel, you're really asking a lot here.
I know. I'm asking a lot.
Yeah, you're asking for the future. So if we look ahead, a company like Uber and Tesla, they're actually investing very heavily in creating a driverless car, right? So a driverless car that you own is available to you anytime to go anywhere on demand. And when you are not using it, so you could actually rent it out very much like a Uber service, right? So it essentially is providing the ability for you to scale to zero when you're not using it and be generally available to other consumers.
So look, I'm a bit obsessed. I am listening to you and I'm a bit obsessed on this Knight Rider thing. So back to the Knight Rider example. So, because he's up the screen, he's still wanting to go somewhere. So you're telling me that like he had this figured out in the 80s? I love the 80s, man.
Yeah, I mean, the Knight industry had figured out in 1980s. But Daniel, if you allow me to extrapolate the future a little bit more, so I'm going to use my other favorite TV show as an example.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not going to be Black Mirror because that show is
that show freaks me out. That show freaks me the right out. I hope it's not Black Mirror.
No, it's not Black Mirror. So it's actually the transporter from the Star Trek. So that is the power of quantum entanglement.
Yeah, I'm not a Trekkie, man, so you just like confuse me. There's too many references now. Let's stick on the Knight Rider one. So, all right, come back to 2020.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel. So that was probably a bit too much science fiction right there. But there is a logic to my extrapolations, right? So if we look at this chart over here, so the transportation option toward the left-hand side requires more actions and planning by the consumers, right? So the train and the bus need plannings, and where the driverless car require very little planning for you to do work on anything, to request. So what it means from the architecture terms is that a system toward the left-hand side has higher application concern.
Oh, I've not heard that term before, but I can definitely see, as you can see there, those elements that are on the left, the buses and the taxis, they take more planning from the consumer's point of view in order to use those services, often resulting in more effort and increased waste of time waiting for buses and taxis and stuff. So okay, if I gather that the higher the application concern, the worse the system. Is that right? And what can improve this system?
Yeah, I mean, the system that has higher application concern doesn't necessarily mean bad. It just
Yep.
means that system is less flexible to changing demands, right?
Right.
So the system toward the right, however, is essentially offloading their application concerns to what we call their infrastructure concerns, meaning
Okay.
more features.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm getting this example right. So any change in demand of the rail network due to an external factor, like say a football game where it peaks and you've got lots of people using the train, or a pandemic like we've seen when no one's traveling, the trains still have to run on schedule, whether there is 10 passengers or 1,000 passengers. So compared to Uber, the Uber will come on my request. If there's demand, more Ubers will come, more people will come, the price goes up. But if no one's using the service, then there's usually less drivers.
Yeah, you're right. And there's a trend here, right? So
Yeah.
the more what when we move this toward the right hand side of the systems, the function is more granular, the
Yep.
performance is more responsive, the user experience is more convenient, and availability is more ubiquitous. And cost, because it's more granular, is more efficient. So Daniel, I think because of this offloading of concern from the user to assistants, and which in real life terms from the developer and administrator to a platform, the security as a side effect actually gets better.
So in Uber's example, the more features that the app is providing on your phone, the less chance that a user is going to make a mistake. So like, for example, in Uber's example, if I get the location wrong, okay, and I'm able to put that little pin, I'm able to reposition the pin so that the driver actually knows I'm on the right side of the street, or I'm able to message the driver and say, oh, pick me up from here now. So even when the user, like me, makes the mistake, a more flexible system will allow us to recover from that mistake. So if I go back to your Star Trek analogy, if I'm trying to take that same Uber to the airport, and if we've gotten into some long conversations before, and I've been a bit late. If I'm running completely late for my flight, like I need to be at the airport in 5 minutes, and it's going to take me 30 minutes from Melbourne to the airport, I can't recover from that. Like Uber, no matter how awesome that service is, it's not going to recover. But if I had a teleporter, like you said, I could recover from that mistake very quickly, and I could get to the airport fast. So
yeah, I mean,
putting that into a real life like scenario, because that's fairly fanciful. What sort of serverless technology could enable that? Like, heard about AWS, and so how about them? How is something like that serverless?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, Daniel, I think if we got Star Trek transporter, you can just transport back home, right?
That's true. I'm not going to the airport. I'm not going to the airport. You're right.
but Daniel, you actually got something right. So Amazon Lambda is actually a very popular example of serverless technology, and they implement this serverless technology like a function as a service, right? I mean, around 5 years ago, when the cloud computing is gaining momentum, a non-for-profit organization called Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, is created. And that was created to incubate, support, and promote cloud native technology. So I went to their website, right? And then I took a snapshot of what the CNCF called the serverless technology landscape. Essentially, these are the technology that is required for serverless. So CNCF actually divided the serverless platform into two categories: the hosted on the left-hand side and the installable on the right-hand side.
Yeah, these are the guys who promote Kubernetes as the foundation project for cloud native runtime, aren't they? That's these guys.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. In fact, there are now over 450 members, right? So when CNCF says something,
sheesh.
Yeah, the open source community take notice. In fact, everybody take notice. So let's do a bit of deep dive a bit on the hosted install platform on what the CNCF was saying.
So just down the bottom right hand corner, that's all of those 450 technologies in some type of organization down here. Is that them? Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the snapshots. So let's use AWS Lambda as an example, because I think everybody been playing around with it. So this is a very simple example, right? So a web browser trigger an actions request, and the event comes into via the API gateway to a Lambda functions. And all that Lambda function does is go to the database and find a result and return that back. So very simple. So the developer writes code, and Lambda just pretty much is executed, right? So let's look at some pro, some advantage of using Lambda. Obviously, speed to productivity, meaning that a developer can be very productive and produce a functional code, within minutes. And another advantage, obviously, is the cost is by consumption. So you only pay for what you use. So let's look at a con. It's a vendor locking, and I think it's a concern that a lot of companies start to take notice. Obviously, it's the things that you build in Lambda is, AWS is not going to allow you to export these to import into Azure, right? So there's a very strong vendor locking. Observability and control is another problem, because you are only exposed to this programming interface. What's underneath there, you might not care, but they do impact your ability to control. So it's essentially a convenience over control trade-off.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at installable platforms. So for the installable platform, it's played by a lot of open source projects. So there are 3 icons here, and the open source community love their fancy icons. So if you can't guess what those are, it's CamelK on the left-hand side, followed by this very cute pink cat called Tectons, and then followed by Knative. So Knative, also CamelK, what it does is that it's based on the chemistry as a source code, and it's like a programming language. It doesn't have to be CamelK. It can be any language to use these platforms, and that's what the CamelK is. So Tectons provides the Kubernetes native CI/CD pipelines, and Knative is a star here. It's a serverless framework that has 2 functions. The first function is deploy the source code into a runtime environment. They call it serving. And 2, it provides out-of-box support for subscribing to cloud event. So again, it's a very simple concept here. The developer writes code, either in CamelK or any language, and then the Knative put that code into an executable container. So let's look at pros here. So it's cloud agnostic. You can take this platform and install in any cloud environment or hardware, as long as Kubernetes runs, and Kubernetes runs in many, many platforms. You got a lot more control and observability here, because you can put in, logging when the servers are being called. So you can, because you know what's underneath there, you can put a lot of different things to make it more observable. But what's a con here? So as opposed to host the platform, there is a baseline cost, right? I mean, the host platform, you pay them as a consumption, so there is cost tied to your usage. But for the installable platforms, the cost is a lot more upfront, and there's a baseline cost. And that's upfront cost and upfront setup, and there's a lot of moving part, like technology that you need to put together. I think you can mitigate that nowadays. You can engage a trusted partner to just deliver that and operate that for you. Yeah, that's pretty much an install platform.
Okay, so yeah, I get it. So there's 2 types of, you've given 2 examples of 2 sort of serverless platforms. One's available from a cloud provider like AWS, and the other one is a pure platform that can be installed by the user. All right, so let's maybe talk about why this is important. So, okay, I'm sold on this. What are the key features of using serverless architecture, Terry? Why do you think that businesses should start to adopt or consider this type of architecture?
Yeah, so if I distill down the key features, I can look at these 6 here, right? The first one is serverless runtime is like a water, very nice water gardens. It containing a small unit of executable logic, and those executable logic are even more granular than a microservice. The second is that the serverless development is inherently modular because you have to make them small so it can be deployed, meaning a better control of quality of the code, and also more granular computing units means that a better utilization of the resource and the cost. The third one is interesting. The developer now just need to write code, right? I know the developer don't like to do anything else. They certainly don't like to do deployments. So there is no need for a developer to figure out all the infrastructure required, and all they have to do is just write codes. And the fourth is project environment. So I heard about some company takes weeks to provision a project environment.
Yeah.
So for serverless environments, once it's set up, a little and no effort is required to set up, to support multiple projects. Number 5 is similar to a container platforms. Horizontal scaling in a serverless framework is building, is part of it. So the developer don't need to worry about it. The 6th one is that we can all now go from sourced code to a runtime deployment in very short succession, and they're all being captured. And so that what that means is that it's much easier from a version management and rollback perspective.
So, okay, so there's some cool features there, but I suppose how do these directly benefit the business?
Yeah, so let's have a look from different perspectives. So
right,
the first one is because serverless architectures require more granular servers, means it's easier to change, serves improve agility, productivity, and obviously it saves costs because it's the more utilizations. And then let's look at a serverless platform. It provides more features, means that we can simplify the solution patterns and solution architectures, easier to maintain. And given the developer now just need to write codes, right? They don't even need to do deployments. I think they're going, they're going to love it. So they're just going to make development more fun. And lastly, from a platform engineer perspective, the development process, the deployment process is fully automated, even more automated than the actual standard CI/CD pipeline. So look at no hands.
So that platform engineer is just like making coffee and stuff now?
Yeah, sure. You can make Audi coffee for me.
Yeah, no, I don't want to do that. All right, so I cover the definition, the technology, and all the benefits here. So those who are still with us, there's been a lot to absorb. What's the key few takeaways, Terry?
Yeah, let me go through just 4 key takeaways. So firstly, we got to prepare for accelerated, and sometimes unexpected change in demand. We need to capitalize on this opportunity only for the prepared people, right? And the second one is that we need to understand. You need to understand your use case and evaluate whether or not you want to host it or install serverless platforms. The third is that you need to enable your developer to focus on what they do best, which is coding. So that's what the third is. And the final one is that we need to shift the application concern to infrastructure concern because it improves agility and flexibility. So I hope these 4 takeaways, if anything, stick to people.
Excellent. So awesome. Thank you so much, Terry. We've got a couple of questions in the Q&A. Let me just get to them. Okay, so in your transport example, Terry, you said function as a service is a polygon. What does that mean? And is that the same as a microservice?
Yeah, I mean, polygon is just a fancy word for allowing to write codes in different programming language for both function as a service and microservice or even service architecture. It supports what we call domain-specific language (DSL). So, for example, you can write and execute code in Java or Node.js, disregarding what's a runtime. So that's what polygon is.
Cool. Miles thinks that Kit is surely running all the time, waiting for a request, not just being spun up per request. Yeah,
that's correct. That's correct. And that's why serverless is such a misnomer as a term, because something needs to run, right? And the question is how efficient that waiting for a command is.
Question from Derek. We've been using AWS Lambda exclusively in our projects. I agree with what you said about vendor lock-in. Our production workload can't move out of AWS anymore. Do you think open source serverless platform like the CNCF example, do you think these are ready for prime time?
Well, I mean, the short answer is yes, but the long answer is that, with a but. So installable platform is certainly not as advanced and mature as the cloud provider specific implementation, because AWS Lambda, for example, is pretty mature, right? But open source serverless community, they are very active, and there's a lot of company that put money into this platform. So now all the open source developers are working from home, I guess, in the most recent months. So I expect to see dramatic improvement in this area.
Thanks. And the last question we've got here is from Noel. Thanks for your interesting pros and con comparison between AWS and native. Have you done some cost analysis for either or both options?
Yeah, that's a no, I haven't not, but I can imagine like there's a base cost for Knative, and it will flatten out over time because the cost per request is falling as a volume decrease, right, or increase. But where there's AWS options, it probably means that you're going to have a similar cost per call over lifetime. So the more call that you make, the more cost effective you're going to have with Knative. But I think most company who is going to pick the install platform is probably not because of cost. It's probably mainly because they don't want to be locked into a particular vendor. Yeah. So AWS is popular in Australia, in a lot of region, but it's actually doesn't work in, say, Japan, right? So if you want something that is transportable in different regions, I think this installable platform is going to work better.
So someone's posted an observation. There are frameworks like serverless.com that seem to allow you to deploy onto hosted platforms like AWS, Lambda, Azure, and native, etc. So it doesn't have to be either or.
Yeah, so that's so I'm just following the CNCF classifications. So AWS itself is not a hosted platform. AWS Lambda is on a hosted platform. So what that means is that in a hosted platform is that the vendor have a full control of all the infrastructures, and people like serverless.com or .io. So they are actually building all of that and allow you to deploy that and executable on the AWS.
Excellent. Well, that looks like that's it for questions. Alok did vote you down for your LD coffee though, so I think that is I think it's very sensible. I think that's a very wise thing. He's a very wise person, Alok. So thanks again for all those who turned out today. Next week we have compliance in 2020, leveraging process-centric approach and modern technology to achieve and maintain compliance. So tune in for that next 12:30 next Wednesday. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending. There'll be an email out with links to our slides. I know Terry's done lots of clicks inside that PowerPoint, so you can click and have a look at the CNCF stuff and a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. If you're interested, we'll send the video out and the slide deck out later on today or first thing tomorrow. Otherwise, thanks very much for staying on today. See you, Terry. See you, everyone.